Good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Friday. It is the third day of October, 2025. And the main stories we have today on Breaking News emphasize how the Middle East is in a period of flux with the immediate outcome unknown. Three huge changes are on the horizon. First of all, from Israel Hayom, mediators race to bypass Hamas objections to the Gaza plan. We'll talk about that. Something's going to happen different in Gaza. It will look differently, either because they accept Trump's peace plan or Israel just basically wipes out what's left of Hamas. Number two, this is really interesting and it hasn't been noted from Israel National News. The clause that was there in the initial Donald Trump 21-point peace plan was removed, blocking the sovereignty in Judea, Samaria. It's removed from the hostage deal after the YESHA Council, that's the council there in Israel, basically in that area, in Judea, Samaria, intervened with Netanyahu. And so we'll talk about that. And this is extremely important, why that would basically change the landscape of Israel. And then finally, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi launches We Take Back Iran system, rallying opposition to the present regime there. So you got three huge stories here. All right. So Gaza, Judea, Samaria, and Iran are all in the headlines with possible earth-shattering changes for each place. That's our story today, this Friday. So let's get to them. Headline number one, mediators race to bypass Hamas's objections to the Gaza plan. This is from Israel Hayom. All the websites are saying something very similar. Disagreements within Hamas leadership are blocking a decision on President Trump's peace plan, and mediators are working to break the deadlock. Their proposal, Hamas would accept the plan in principle, followed by an international conference to discuss its details. Hamas is demanding a ceasefire the moment it gives that initial approval, while Israel insists on full agreement from Hamas and all the other Palestinian factions. According to Al Arabiya, internal disputes in Hamas over Trump's peace plan for Gaza are preventing the terrorist organization from making a decision at this stage, despite pressure from the United States and most Arab states. To avoid missing the deadline set by Trump, Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey are advancing a formula under which Hamas would declare its acceptance of the plan's principles, after which an international conference would be convened to discuss the details. The conference would include Gulf states, Egypt, Turkey, Hamas, Israel, the U.S., and representatives of European countries. The idea already presented to Hamas officials is now under discussion within the group's leadership. The U.S. is involved through Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. One of Hamas's main questions is whether a ceasefire would begin immediately after its announcement of support for the plan's principles. Hamas argues that such approval should mean an automatic halt to military action. Yeah, just because they give their word to it. Sure. Israel's position that the ceasefire would only take effect once Hamas and all other Palestinian factions give full consent, at which point a 3-day countdown would begin for the release of all the remaining hostages. In other words, once they give their full consent, you got 72 hours to give us all the hostages. Hamas has already told the mediators it would need more than 3 days to establish contact with all the armed groups holding hostages and prepare them for release. Hamas leaders also raised the possibility that another group, such as Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which also holds hostages, might refuse to comply. In talks with Egyptian, Qatar, and Turkish mediators, Hamas emphasized that a comprehensive agreement would require prior consent from all factions. Islamic Jihad has already stated it opposes the plan. The mediators expect Hamas to provide a nuanced response by early next week, formal acceptance of the plan, but with demands, get this again, demands for changes and clarifications on several points. That is why they're pushing to hold a proposed conference. An Arab diplomat involved in the talks said Turkey's involvement has shifted the dynamic. On the one hand, Hamas leaders are receiving encouragement and backing. On the other hand, the Turkish representatives have joined in pressuring Hamas to accept the plan, stressing that it offers the fastest and most viable path to ending the war. Qatar, too, has moved away from its former neutrality, joining Egypt in pressing Hamas in line with commitments made to Washington. According to the source, neither Qatar nor Turkey has threatened Hamas leaders with expulsion if they refuse the plan, but they could use that card if Hamas hardens its position. That would be a great thing. In other words, throw them all, throw the leaders out of their country. So where are they going to go? Because they go to both, they're staying Qatar and Turkey, these billionaires, and just say, okay, if you're going to reject the plan, then out you go. Okay, so U.S. diplomatic sources, President Trump is determined to end the war through his plan. If Hamas rejects it, the U.S. will fully support Israel's military operations, as Trump has already pledged, and will also begin help implementing the plan in areas not controlled by Hamas. Israel Hayom previously revealed, this is from that website, that several clauses of the plan concerning refugee rehabilitation are already being implemented, including Israel's approval of a list of hundreds of Palestinian workers slated to serve as officials in the new governing authority in Gaza. All right, so here's the bottom line. The response of Hamas is so predictable. A reply of, yes, we agree, but. Yes, but means no. And that's exactly what they're saying. And they're making demands, or they're in no position to make demands. If they do not agree, then Israel should step up the fighting. So that's where we're at right now. That's the latest. And it's Friday, and we just had Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, when everything shut down. Now you've got the Shabbat coming, the Sabbath, or until tomorrow night. Saturday evening in Israel, everything is shut down too. So we won't hear a lot from Israel and all this, but this kind of lays it out as it is. Now, what's really interesting from Israel National News, there was another story that didn't get much airplay, and I didn't even realize this until I happened to read this today. The clause that was blocking sovereignty in Judea Samaria was removed from the hostage deal after the YESHA Council intervention. This is from Israel National News. Now, we had the story about certain people going to New York and meeting with Netanyahu at the UN after he gave the speech before he met with President Trump to hammer out, the ultimate plan there, which Trump, switched, obviously made a lot of changes in favor of Israel. And part of it was don't say, that you reject the right to annex or declare sovereignty or declare Israel's, claim to certain parts of Judea and Samaria. In other words, you could say, we're going to annex this part for Israel. It's our land. It's not going to be part of, the so-called West Bank. It's Judea, Samaria. And so anyway, this is what's interesting. So following an emergency meeting between the YESHA Council leaders and Prime Minister Netanyahu in New York, a clause in the proposed Gaza plan, which would have prevented Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, was removed. The clause had previously been included in U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the hostages still held by Hamas's terror group. If Hamas had accepted the proposal, Israel would have been blocked from applying sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, regardless of the situation on the ground. All right, so while this has not been highlighted, it's an important change from the original Trump plan that was released. In other words, Israel would not give up the right to apply their sovereignty over Judea and Samaria if they so desire. If they wish, they could declare certain portions of the West Bank under their control, the so-called West Bank. Now, lest we forget, this is the crucial point here. God gave the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that land. It does not belong to anyone else. In our book, 25 Signs, we're near the end, Appendix 5. Listen to the first 2 points we make. The question is, Appendix 5, basically, who owns the land? What does the Bible say about the ownership of the promised land? Okay, here's what we write. Fact 1, the promised land belongs to God. While in one sense, the entire earth belongs to the Lord, the God of the Bible, there's a certain plot of land that specifically belongs to him, he said. He made this clear in a statement recorded in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 23. He said, the land must not be sold without reclaim, because the land belongs to me. For you are foreign residents, temporary settlers with me. That's very clear. Leviticus 25:23. Note the claim of the Lord. The promised land, this specific land, belongs to him. Then fact number 2, the Lord gave this particular land to Abram and his descendants. While it does belong to the Lord, it was uniquely given to this man named Abram as well as his descendants. Listen to Genesis chapter 12, verses 1, 6, and 7. The Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's house to a land I will show you. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring, I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. All right, so we document in our book, 25 Signs, we're near the end, Appendix 5. What does the Bible say about the ownership of the promised land? It's a free download from our website, Educating Our World, under the heading of Bible Prophecy. So bottom line is, God gave this to Israel. This is Israel's land. This is part of the agreement God made, and it's his call who owns the land. So this should be non-negotiable as far as Israel's concerned, and they should never have had a clause in the agreement saying, well, we won't take sovereignty or take control over part of Judea, Samaria. That's part of the promised land. All right. Now, there's another possible huge change in the Middle East, apart from Judea and Samaria and apart from Gaza, and that's with Iran. Now, this one is really interesting, and we'll see what happens here. This from the Jerusalem Post. Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi launches, "We take back Iran's system, rallying opposition." He announced, and he's again the oldest son of the late Shah of Iran. Pahlavi announced the "We Take Back Iran" system to organize opposition, expose corruption, and support Iran's national campaign. Iranian Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi announced the launch of "We Take Back Iran" system in a post on his official X Twitter on yesterday. The new system intended to assisting in mobilizing and organizing Iranians who oppose the Islamic Republic, led by the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was launched on Thursday to coincide with the Zoroastrian festival of Mehragan. The new system will act as, quote, "the main road for, quote, exposing corruption, as well as, quote, gathering financial and logistical support in order to boost Pahlavi's, quote, national campaign to save Iran." Pahlavi claims tens of thousands of security personnel have joined the system. His latest announcement follows on from the National Cooperation to Save Iran conference in Munich in July. Since then, Pahlavi claims that tens of thousands of military, police, security, and government workers have registered with the system. Pahlavi commented that the first phase of the Iran Prosperity Project being unveiled as a roadmap to rebuild the country, as well as presenting the emergency period program for managing the first 3 to 6 months after the Islamic Republic regime would be overthrown, along with diplomatic efforts to apply maximum pressure on the regime, are key steps taken in recent months to advance the goals of deposing the regime. And that's what we've been talking about, them doing that. The Iran Prosperity Project, which involves more than 100 advisors and experts working to revitalize Iran's economic and political future, have published a 170-page emergency reconstruction plan covering 15 critical areas, from political transition and security reforms to technical challenges, including energy, water management, and environmental restoration. So they're all set to move in if they can overthrow the Ayatollah's regime. All right, so here's the big question. Will this movement succeed? Only time will tell. Now, we do know from Scripture that Iran will ultimately side with Russia in the last days invasion of Israel, according to Ezekiel 38:39. We know where the nations will eventually end up, but we don't know the timing, as we always say that here. With the timing is up to the Lord, and certain things may happen that spread the timing out. We just don't know. So see our book, 25 Signs. We're near the end. Signs 9 to 11 for an explanation. So as usual, we're waiting to find out what happens in Gaza, Judea, Samaria, and Iran. And always, as always, we will keep you posted. So huge things are in the works, and we'll just see how this all turns out. It's very exciting to watch. But the bottom line is we know where it's all going, where it will end. And it's interesting to see how all the pieces of the puzzle are falling into place to get us there. So we'll keep you posted on that. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks so much for watching and we'll of course have another edition of Breaking News later today, Friday. Until then, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.